everybody, and welcome to the Compliance Alliance Spotlight with a subject matter expert. And today I have with me Tracy Nardo. Hello, Tracy.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today, Lynn. I'm so excited to talk all things safety and compliance.
I am very much looking forward to this because we've had some off-camera conversations, and we're going to be talking today, like you said, about all things safety, compliance. But we're going to zero in for today's conversation around what you refer to is, I want to make sure that I say it exactly right, these high risk moments. And you've got so much to say about that. But for those that don't already know you, could you introduce yourself and a bit about how you got into the industry?
Sure. Yeah, as you know, my name is Tracy Nardo. I am currently a licensing specialist for Celebrity School. Prior to that, the last 14 years I've spent in risk management on the safety side of things. So helping childcare centers in their safety program, implementing a safety audit, really going in and helping to coach and guide them and navigate through the schools through safety. So yeah, this is a passion of mine. I've been in early childhood for 36 years. So I'm super excited to talk today.
That's great. Well, and I think we could start with a perception of the word compliance, because I bump into this and I want to have you as our subject matter expert talk about it. I'll just preface this by saying, with the work that we do at the Compliance Alliance, compliance and safety isn't always looked at as the badge of honor, much like it is in other industries outside of early education. So share with us your perspective on that word, and is there an alternative, or how might we embrace it for the betterment of everybody?
Absolutely. So I know there are some subject matter experts out there that think maybe taking compliance out of the title would be better. I think it is a scary word for some. I wish it wasn't. We are our partners. We are their support role. For me, it's more of an outcome. It's changing their perception. It is partnering with the schools, partnering with the district managers, partnering with the directors and the teachers, really coaching them on safety practices. And like I said earlier, guiding them through safety in their schools, all aspects, the paperwork part of it, how to mop a floor, how to put children to sleep on their back if they're in the infant room, doing nap time checks. It's really guiding them and really talking about all of those subjects. Communication is super important when it comes to compliance, telling them the reason why. So it's not just a check off sheet, it's not just a list. Let's just make sure that we're doing it and checking it off. Really being proactive instead of reactive. So training prior to teachers starting in the classroom is tremendously important. They need to have all of the training and education before they're left alone with children. And I think just to be very transparent, there's been a lot of things that happened over the last 36 years, good and bad, that, I can share with them. So being very transparent, if this does not happen, this is what could occur. So just trying to mitigate those risks are super important. So changing the perception of the word compliance.
So I think what I'm also hearing you say is, although some subject matter experts might say take the word compliance out of the equation, it
Yep.
sounds like you're an advocate for keeping it in, but it's more about what the outcome is and the perception of what compliance entails, which you just beautifully outlined some of those areas. Did I capture
Ab-
that correctly?
You did perfect. Yeah, being a more of a support role, a partner, not the police. We're not coming in and giving you, this is, we're giving you the reasons why we're doing what we're doing and partnering and having that support. Yeah.
Excellent. And what I'm also finding is when we explain to staff, regardless of the role that staff play, when we explain the why behind the what, there's better understanding of this isn't a bunch of rules, or as you said, a bunch of boxes to tick. And it's really the why, like you said, over the past 36 years, in your experience, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Hmm.
which can fall under the heading of compliance.
Yep.
So, anyhow, just any comment about that before we talk about some of those moments?
No, I just think health and safety, it's like the utmost important thing when it comes to high quality childcare. So we really want to be compliant in all aspects throughout the center.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah,
So the meat of today's conversation is around high risk moments, and we're going to park here for quite a bit. Let's just start with defining examples or categories of the high risk moment in the early education setting.
absolutely. So those are times of the day when things could happen and that could be catastrophic. It could make the media. It, it could really be risky. So we try to mitigate those risks during those times of the day. And some of those times would include eating, transportation, napping. So, if something were to happen while we are transporting children, if we're not doing the bus sweep, making sure that all of the children have gotten off the bus and someone's left on the bus in a hot bus, that could be very catastrophic. That could make the media, the Google reviews, all of those things could be really damaging to a school.
Well, these are things that we don't like to think about. These are things that we pray never happen in our schools.
Absolutely.
So it's the best practices to make sure that we are doing those sweeps. We are making sure that gates are locked. We are doing the name to face recognition,
Yes.
with regularity, not just counting heads. We could go on, but I do think it's important for us to really look at some of those scenarios that could have been avoided um, during those high risk moments as examples that others can use of how to avoid it. So could you walk us through a couple of those?
Sure. So when it comes to transportation, again, you want to make sure that you have a policy in place when getting the children off the bus. So maybe that is a double check. Maybe a member of management comes out to the bus to also double check the driver, just making sure there's no children left under the seats, in the seats, slouched down. We just don't want to stand at the front of the bus and look and say, yep, there's nobody here. So we really want to make sure. There's been several occasions in my 36 years that children have been left on the bus. They have been left on the bus in their school's parking lot. They have gotten on the wrong bus at a public school, been taken to the wrong school. So again, those policies are put in place for a reason. But yeah, double checking just the potential risk of leaving a child left unattended is scary.
Are you able to share in either the child getting on the wrong bus or being left on a bus, what what was the outcome of that and how was it handled
Mhm.
and what's the impact of that?
Sure. So yeah, so most recently, within the last year, there was a child that was left on the bus at his school. So they picked him up from kindergarten, brought them back. They took all the kids off. This one was slouched down. He was asleep. It was in a very hot state that's very hot in the summertime. So he was left on the bus for about an hour, which is scary because number one, he can't get the windows down. He can't, take that big handle and open the door. Very scary. He was crying. Unfortunately, a parent that was coming to pick up their child looked over, saw the child on the bus. Yeah, not good. He was okay, so he was good. However, the parent was very upset seeing that there was a child left on the bus. She contacted licensing, contacted the media. The media was out at the school, so it snowballs. That teacher had to take the driver training again. She was not able to drive for a little bit. We really, making sure that did she take the driver training to begin with, making sure that wasn't missed. Um, was the step missed that somebody else went back out and checked the bus? So really making sure that those policies are followed. Just because they're put in place doesn't mean that they're actually being followed. So, obviously something's happened to put all of these policies in place, but we want to make sure that they're followed every
Yeah,
day, every day. Yeah, that was a scary incident for sure.
that was a scary incident on so many levels. And from a parent's perspective, uh, I'm getting a little bit off of the high risk moment, but I think it's worth highlighting here. From a parent's perspective, oftentimes when they're evaluating a preschool for their child or an after school or before school program, they're looking at programming, curriculum,
Mhm.
of course, safety, the reputation. However, of all the things I just mentioned, the number one thing that shoots to the top after an experience like that is
Safety, right?
so I don't think we can overemphasize without scaring people, but part of our communication about the measures we take to ensure a safe environment. I know we do that, but that's the why behind why we do
Why
it.
we do it.
Yes,
Yes.
it only takes one of those
Mhm.
that reputational damage that you need to walk back.
Yes.
And then you really are forced into that situation of telling a story that you should be already prepared to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that could have been a really bad outcome, you know? So
You could.
thankfully, yes, thankfully the parent did see him and, he was okay.
Okay.
More
So
scared than anything, but
that was a happy outcome for the child, at least that,
yes.
it could have been worse, but it wasn't.
Yes.
Then other high risk moments, you mentioned transportation. What are some other high risk moments within the day?
Yeah, sure. So eating. It is imperative, in my opinion, that staff members sit with the children while they are eating. It is really important that children have their food cut to size. So the infants, the toddlers, the twos, maybe no more than a quarter of an inch to a half an inch food size. I know sometimes it's difficult when parents provide the lunches, but
Yeah.
it's important to have that communication around food size for infants, toddlers, and twos because it could be a choke hazard. So the potential risk would be choking. So it is imperative that you are maybe not putting out the cots during lunch, maybe not doing something else, filling out the daily sheets or whatever that they're doing. It's important that they really focus on the children because when someone's choking, you may not realize it. They become quiet, they don't know what to do, they're scared. And if you're not really paying attention to them, you may not see that. So I recommend sitting with the kids and or close and supervising them, maybe one behavior at a time. Sit with the children when they're done, then take out the cots. But I know a lot of schools they want to rush through lunch to get the kids down on their cots and I get that. So the importance of talking about how it could be a choke hazard and a potential risk. So helping to mitigate that would be supervising with the children. So maybe one person sits at lunch and the other one does something else, but really, really focusing on the children and one behavior at a time.
Yes, I liked what you were saying, one behavior at a time, because you're right. They're trying to accomplish a lot.
Mhm.
What you just said points to not only the why behind it, but you can't afford not to,
Yes.
because we know the impact of a choking hazard. Or I want to, while we're talking about meal or snack times, I'd also like
Mhm.
to talk about food allergies. This is a trend I've seen where we have an increase in food sensitivities or true food allergies. So, is there a best practice around that you've seen, not only the training, but how to be hyper vigilant about those allergies mostly?
Yeah.
Uh, can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I recommend that each classroom and the kitchen have an allergy list center wide and also in the kitchen. I think it should be important. I'm sorry, it should be center wide in every classroom because we transition children and teachers so much to fit into ratios and maintaining, staff child ratios that sometimes there's a floater, a substitute, a new teacher that doesn't know the children. So I also think the allergy list should have a photo of the children. So maybe if you're a new teacher, you're in there at snack time, let's just double check if anybody in here have a milk allergy or, you can put a name to a face. So I recommend that to be updated as needed, but at least once a month.
And when somebody's coming into the classroom, a best practice of the very first thing, especially during mealtime, that you take a look
Take
wherever
a look.
it or however that's communicated about the child. And that I love that having the photo there, that name to face recognition, which is actually going to bring us into transitions. Uh,
Okay.
I don't know if that's one of the high risk areas that you want to
Yes.
probably almost spend the remainder of our time, but let's talk about that.
Yes, transitions, they can be tricky. I get questions all the time around, I'm a teacher by myself in the classroom. I've got 10 children. How do I manage this when they have to go to the bathroom? We don't have a bathroom in our classroom. I'm outside. They have to go in. So realistically, what should happen is I recommend that all classrooms have a walkie-talkie. If they're outside, they can certainly call up front. And so that also means that the director needs to have that other piece on her at all times. So if anything should
Right?
happen in an emergency, she's out by herself. I had a very scary situation one time. I was a director and the teacher was outside with 4 toddlers by herself. She got stung by a bee. She's allergic to bees. She had an EpiPen. The EpiPen was in her car. She was by herself. It was really, really scary. So, you know, things like that happen, and then you put some systems in place. But I think a good system is to have those walkie-talkies,
Yes.
make them available, make sure that they're on batteries, whatever that looks like, charged. And then I think also doing a name to face through each threshold. So if you have to go through the classroom door, making sure that you've got the correct 10 kids named to face, not just counting heads, taking them out to the playground outside the class or playground door to get outside, do that name to face check again. And then as you come back, making sure you've got the right 10 kids named to face, and then once inside. So really focusing on through every threshold. If you're doing a name to face, you've got the walkie talkie in case you have an emergency or you have somebody that has to go to the bathroom, you have that help. But really, sometimes transitions can be very tricky because I've had people say, look, I just had to run 2 kids to the bathroom. So I just let them walk across the hall, or, we can't leave them unsupervised. So it is tough when you're by yourself, but you might have to take half the class. If you've got 2 teachers, you may have to take half the class to the bathroom in the hallway and come back. So, really maintaining those ratios, but also having a policy and a procedure in place for transitions, imperative.
And practicing. I mean,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
transition and it's the training, but the practicing, even if they're trained when they're onboarded or, every
Yes.
month, it's the practice of no child should ever be left alone
Right.
unsupervised. Right away, that's a licensing violation.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So, again, I don't love highlighting this, but it's a bit of the why. So are there scenarios where somehow that little, in spite of counting heads, maybe it wasn't a name to face recognition, is left behind on a playground or worse, somehow manages to leave the safety of a playground or the building? Do you have some scenarios where that actually happened and how it was handled?
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I have seen it several times in several different capacities. So they've left children inside in the building when they've taken children outside. Maybe they were in the bathroom and, walked out without them. They have left them on the playground. They may have been like in one of those like tunnels and they're laying in there just playing and resting, and the rest of the kids go inside. I've seen them walk out the front gates, walk to a business, walk around the back of the fenced in area. I've seen a lot of children left behind, and it always comes down to not following their procedure and practice in place. So not doing that name to face, we just open the door and they just come back in and we've settled down and now we're on to our next task and we haven't really checked who is with us. So, you know, again, putting those practices in place and procedures.
So let's just say we do a name to face, and if you just have one teacher and the person at the end of the line sees their friends still playing, they get out of line, off they go back into the building. I mean, it could happen, right?
Yeah, yeah, yep.
We've seen it. And then how on earth does a child get out of a secure playground area? So there is a safety aspect of that perhaps you've seen where that scenario, they're on the other side of the fence. How did that happen?
Yes. So in some municipalities, some states, some counties, it depends on the fire marshal and whether they can keep a lock on the gate during business hours. So that's one thing. The other part of that is we always tell people on the playgrounds to separate on the playground, making sure that you can see all areas of the playground and all the children. That means if your playground is L-shaped, you might have somebody on one side, maybe it's by the gate area, but you can also see the big side of the playground and someone is on that side. So really making sure that you are in sight and sound of everyone, because if the gate is unlocked, a child can just open that gate and go. Now, more times than not, I see them using like carabiners or some sort of lock, just to kind of deter anybody from coming. Maybe that's a safety lock. It's not, it's just a child lock, but it does work. Yeah. So yes, unfortunately, that has happened.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we know about those situations, and they're few and far between, but it only takes one.
it
And it's
does.
the scenario of you've got a PR issue, you've got how you deal with the staff member in whose care the child was,
Yep.
how you handle that situation, and then, of course, how to report to licensing.
Yes. Yeah. All mandated reporting to licensing. They have to self-report. Unfortunately, again, mom kid goes home, tells the mom, mom's upset, media, licensing, again, how to handle the teacher. Do we do training? Is it a zero tolerance? So it really is up to the schools, but it is, I always say, what if these were your children? You know, what would you do? So I always try to put them in that seat, sometimes letting them know the why, and if that was them, how would they feel?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Are there other high risk moments that we want to highlight in the course of a day?
I think the napping situation for infants, making sure that they nap on their back, how important that is because of SIDS. Also, making sure that teachers are checking them during nap time. So that is going over to the crib, making sure that their coloring is good. They don't have anything laying in the crib, nothing's fallen off of them. The crib should be clear of everything. Just doing those sleep checks, as I call them. Maybe it's a 15-minute nap time check, etc., and documenting that to show that you have checked the child. So I think that is super important because that could be suffocation. So all those high risk times of the day could, like I said earlier, could be catastrophic or make the media, or, somebody's job could be lost. So all those things,
All of the above, right?
all of it.
Uh, there is a situation that was shared with me that I'd love you to give some perspective on because I don't think it's unique to this situation. And the scenario is mom of child said, I want you to have the child sleep with the tethered pacifier. Now, what could possibly go wrong with a tethered pacifier, right? Obviously, there's some safety concerns there, but the part I'd love for you to comment on is how do you handle when mom says, this is how I want the child to be put to sleep, when you know that's not in the best interest or it could potentially be in violation of your best practices? What would you say?
I think if you have the conversation with a parent, infant parents sometimes are the first time moms. They need to know the why behind what we're doing. And a lot of times, what we're doing in childcare is not what they're doing at home, of course, right? But I think if you talk about the safety aspect of things, so we're not going to let them rock them to sleep and keep them asleep in the teacher's arms for 2 hours, right? Because that's what they do at home. We are safe sleep practices, and I think that has been put in place for years now, where children have been placed on their back. The crib mattress sheets on there are tightly fitted so they can't pull anything over their head. We should not have any blankets, no bumper pads, no toys, things like that. Pacifiers, if they come out, sometimes we just put them in the cubbies for later. We just talk about the safety aspect of everything and what could be and the reasons we're doing it. So sometimes childcare is different than what parents are doing at home, but I think they understand once we explain things to them. And
Yes.
this is our policies and procedures. So
And for the teachers to feel confident that they can have the conversation or,
Yes.
escalate it to a director, to have
Yes.
the conversation, because we can be intimidated as a staff member, but this is mom's child who has asked me to do this and
Yeah.
want to be accommodating, but
Yeah.
yet there are all sorts of reasons why that's not in the best interest, nor is it following standard procedure.
Yes. I just had somebody ask me, a parent asked me about glass bottles in the infant room. And we typically don't allow glass bottles in the infant room just because of breakage, etc. So, just explaining the why.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, we could continue to talk about these high risk moments. I think we've painted that picture. And as we started out the conversation, it's about the why, it's about the training, it's about the outcomes, which are safe environments, keeping the children and staff safe. So I want to spend the last few minutes that we have talking about, I made note here. So you were saying, that they're trained,
Mhm.
and when they're onboarded, which of course we do that, but let's talk about how often do you think these things should be practiced, the frequency of drills? What do you see in an already very busy day? What does best practice look like with that?
So I would say when it comes to a new staff member, onboarding is extremely important. And sometimes if they are it's available, maybe doing something in person because that gets their attention, versus maybe a video that they've got to watch and they might be doing three other things at once, or do some sort of knowledge check. But I also think not putting them in the classroom until they understand the policies, maybe having a mentor teacher sit with them for a week or so. I mean, I don't know that that's always possible. Just having that communication with somebody that they can go to and ask questions, um, and maybe understand the reasons why we're doing what we're doing.
Yes, it comes back to why. I mean, I've kind of been harping on that, but so often this is what you need to do in a given day.
Yep.
The why behind that becomes the motivation.
Yeah. But you also had a good point. How often should all of those things be done? So when it comes to onboarding, somebody might be onboarded today and then 3 years later, things change, right? Policies change. Licensing might have come out with something. We might have a new regulation coming down. I think sometimes a refresher course in things is needed. If they've got safe sleep violations or they're having trouble with their infant teachers, maybe it's a time for a refresher. If it's a child left on the bus, all of bus drivers maybe should have that refresher and take that training. So, really managing your school and figuring out where the need is. So, it could be an annual thing, it could be a refresher at any given time. Yeah.
That's helpful. And the conversations that I have with owners and administrators for the work that we do at the Compliance Alliance is to do an assessment, a compliance assessment,
Hmm.
and to be proactive. You were mentioning that earlier of, be proactive measures to make sure that nothing bad happens.
Yes.
So it's really about being proactive. So just recently, an owner said to me, I would like a second set of eyes to make sure we're not missing anything.
Hmm.
So there's benefit in that second set of eyes, because in the schools that you manage and have managed over the course of your career, sometimes we get comfortable with the fact, well, we've got that procedure in place. So we
Hmm.
check that box. Any thoughts about that set of eyes?
Yes. So some people become very complacent too. I've delegated that to somebody that's not on my plate, but yet I'm running the school. And we really should monitor that delegation. There's something to be said about a benefit of doing self auditing, or coaching in the moment. Um, yeah, you can course correct before something really does happen, or before a licensing violation or an OSHA violation or a visit happens. So it just lowers the risk of any violations when you're doing an assessment or you're self auditing your school.
So important to do those self audits. I would love to have you come back, and we're going to do another segment on self audits, what you're looking for, how to analyze your self audits. I mean, that's a whole conversation, and it happens to come out in the form of data, but in a spreadsheet behind every single cell, there's a story of why
Yes,
you're doing what you're doing. And
absolutely.
I would love to have you come back and talk about the data side of compliance and how you use that to ensure proactive best practices are being followed through a self audit.
Yeah, I absolutely would love that, Lynn. Thank you.
All right. Well, this has been very helpful, insightful, and we look forward to having you back on a future segment. And thank you again for your time and your insights.
Thank you so much for having me today.